Hey guys, Southwest Urban Homestead. Today I'm going to show you guys how to make a worm bin. The materials you're going to need to make a worm bin: a simple tub. This is a Rubbermaid 3-gallon tote. Doesn't require a whole lot. Whatever you do, you want more surface area versus depth. Surface area is more important than depth. With the worms that we use, I use red wigglers. They're apigic, so they bunch up and they just get all together. They don't really go down. They're not like your typical earthworm that you'd find in your yard. Those earthworms burrow down and then burrow up. These worms just kind of get in a mass and they eat everything. Next thing you're going to need is a drill and an 1/8 inch drill bit. 1/8 inch because it's slightly smaller than most of your worms are going to be. Another thing you need is bedding. I use mostly cut up paper towel tubes. They work really well. What you want to use for bedding is any high carbon material. You can use fall leaves, cardboard, corrugated cardboard, drink trays, toilet paper rolls, paper towel rolls. You can use all sorts of things. Hay, straw, whatever you want to use, just make sure you have a lot of it, because it really takes a lot. And the last thing you're going to need is some kind of food stock. What I have here is looks like frozen strawberries. Yeah, it's a big bag of strawberries that had gone bad, so I wrapped them up, put them in the freezer, waiting on their turn to get into the compost heap. Alright, the first thing you're going to do is get your drill set up with your bit in, and then you're going to eye start on the lid. And you just want to drill holes everywhere you can. Lots of people want to make them real pretty. It doesn't really matter how pretty they are. What really matters is airflow. Alright, you can see we got holes drilled all around it, plenty of holes. Go ahead and knock off any of the rough edges you have. You're going to have plastic everywhere too. Now you'll notice I didn't drill any holes on the bottom of this bin. That's something you can do. You can drill holes in the bottom of the bin and get a second bin and set it up on top of something inside the bin so excess liquid can drain through. It is really helpful, especially with these enclosed plastic bins, to have that extra drainage, because they do get extremely wet because there's nowhere for the moisture to go. Alright, the next thing you want to do is start adding some bedding. You want enough bedding in the bottom of the bin to fill up about 1.5 inches, 2 inches worth of space. Once you've got your bedding in, you can go ahead and add some food. Now I'm adding these whole. It doesn't really matter, but if you chop them up really fine or even blend them, you could end up with a better result. It's called optimization. The more surface area there is for the microbes to colonize, the faster it breaks down. I'm just going to put a handful in here because they haven't started breaking down yet, and they're going to be really, really moist. Alright, now the last thing you need is worms. Now what I do is I go into my other worm bin and I make sure to pull out a good handful of material, because this material is what we call living material. It's already inoculated with microbes and fungi and mold, and it's going to have some worm cast. Oh, there's one right there. It's going to have some worm eggs in it right there. I don't know if you can see that little guy. It's a little worm egg. It's going to have some eggs in it. They can help kickstart the process. So I'm just going to go ahead and sprinkle it in there. Lots of worms. Pick up the guy I dropped on the floor and toss him in. Then the very last thing is you go ahead and add more bedding. Now there's no such thing as too much bedding, so don't scrimp on the bedding. I go ahead and I fill it all the way to the top. And you go ahead and put your lid on. You have a worm bin. So what do you want to use as bedding? Well, you can use anything that's got a really high carbon content. For example, corrugated cardboard works really well. You just need to make sure to optimize whatever you use by tearing it up into small chunks. By tearing it up into small chunks, you're optimizing it for bacterial colonization. The more surface area there is, the more area there is for the bacteria to colonate. Newspaper, newsprint is a wonderful, wonderful thing to use as bedding. I really love newspaper, the worms really love newspaper. Chunks of this just balled up, just teeming with worms. The other thing about high carbon bedding, especially the newsprint for some reason, the worms really seem to love laying their eggs in it. So that's something to think about with the newsprint. Brown paper bags make excellent bedding. Again, all this stuff, you need to make sure that you optimize it by tearing it into small chunks so it has lots of room for colonization. Paper towel rolls and toilet paper rolls. Everybody should have tons and tons of these. I have access to literally hundreds of these paper towel rolls. That's why the majority of my bedding is paper towel rolls. Things to stay away from are citruses, lemons, oranges. They're high in acid. Worms don't really like acid. They'll eat the fruit sure enough, but the peels tend to stay for a really long time until they break down far enough to be eaten. Other things to stay away from: meat products, dairy products. Yes, they'll break them down, but that stuff can contain pathogens, such things to feed your worms. Vegetable scraps, fruit scraps, manure. When it comes to manure, you want aged manure. Remember, any of this stuff, if you want it to go faster, it's best to optimize the feed by either chopping it up real fine or blending it. Blending it tends to work the best because you're chopping it into the finest particle you can get, and the bacteria can colonize almost all of the fruit, all of the food instantly. Starches, you want to do starches in moderation. Bread, potatoes, things like that, rice. You don't want to do them in big quantities all at once. Eggshells. Eggshells are a great addition to any worm bin, but you want to pulverize them almost to a powder, otherwise they will not get processed. Coffee grounds. Coffee grounds are another excellent addition into your worm bin. They provide grit for the worm's gullet, and they're high in nitrogen. Worms also love them. I don't know if it's the caffeine fix or what, but they seem to go crazy for them. The only problem I've had with coffee grounds is keeping them wet enough, so I tend to bury them in my lower region, into the lower regions of the bin, because there's a lot more moisture down there. So one, they help absorb some of the excess moisture, and two, the extra moisture helps keep them from heating up. Alright guys, there you have it. How to make a worm bin. A couple of things I forgot to mention during the whole process. When it comes to cardboard, you don't want to use cardboard like this. It's been printed with color and has the shine to it. This has a plastic in it that won't compost. Another thing, with your newspaper, if you get newspaper with colored print on it, you might want to call the company that printed the paper and see what kind of inks they use and if there's heavy metals in their inks. A lot of papers, most papers have switched over to soy-based inks, but you never know, so it's always better to be safe rather than sorry. So that's it for this one, guys. If you have any questions, feel free to put them in the comments. I'll get back to you as soon as I can. Thanks for watching. Like and subscribe.